Justin Trudeau, a slithery, slimy snake. Intellectually impotent, a deceitful charlatan, and he's poisoning Canada. His entourage are snakes too, some more than others, but snakes nonetheless because they follow his slithery trails. Their intellectual cannibalism is festering like a plague throughout our government and educational institutions, and it's rapidly undermining this country. Then there's the news media. More snakes. They're everywhere. Sneaky. Fucking snakes. A media that is so contrary to the truth that their entire mission quest is woven around trying to twist and tangle and smother and stifle every last glimmer out of reality. It's really disgusting. And then, of course, there's the other instrument of deceit, the infamous social media and the big guns of information control. And all the snakes collaborate with the little snakes following the big snakes, and if the snakes don't like what you say, they will hiss at you, racist. And all the snakes entwined with the likes of this piece of shit are going to tell you how to think and what you should and should not believe with regards to what's happening in the world. Every time I see this asshole's face, I swear his skull is continually mutating and bulging out more and more like some cyborg nearing his expiration date on a Skynet mission. He really is just a droid run by remote anyway, and if he became problematic, Skynet would just uninstall him. Whatever the case, snakes or cyborgs, the traitors are everywhere.
But that's not true. You're fake news.
Cry the social justice warriors and ignoramuses from other countries, especially the Middle East.
Justin Trudeau's not a snake. He's the coolest prime minister ever. He's a rock star, a celebrity, the PM of Suave. So hot, so handsome, so clever, but not really.
Indeed. Any question of how he would run the country is more in keeping with how he would ruin the country. Simple as that. He has no idea what he's doing. And it's nauseating that people think all this fashion and celebrity popularity bullshit actually matters. It wouldn't be as tragic if it was just a case of him being incompetent, but it's not. He's incompetent and a traitorous snake. And I'm tired of the poison that spills out of his mouth, and I'm tired of his expectations that everyone needs to stoop to the depth of his intellectual decay. Few things worse than being told to be stupid and blindly accept stupid ideas and do it with a gleeful nod of approval. Especially when the demand is coming from an impertinent slimeball like him. But this is especially true when the ideas involve the destruction of the very country that one was born in and still resides in. And I'm referring to myself with regard to that remark. I'm not so sure about your origins of birth because you are one creepy, slimy, despicable creature. So let me tell you something slick. Nobody handed you this country in a box with instructions to destroy it. You think you and all your infectious minions are going to violate this country while you conspire to marshal some grand Trudeau Inquisition to quell anyone that objects to your obscene measures and sheer insanity? I don't think so, you piece of filth. Yes, filth. That's what you are, because it's so revolting what you're doing. And stop trying to twist things all around and consolidate that remark to infer that I'm driven by hate. Or in your rhetoric, a white supremacist driven by hate. But we mustn't forget the driven by hate part. You people are pathetic, and I'm afraid you're quite mistaken with your assessment. But I'll tell you what, since you just love to say things like Canadians expect and Canadians know and Canadians are quick to point out, well, Canadians that hold you accountable and despise you for the perpetual storm you have now swept upon the existing and future citizens of this country aren't hate-driven white supremacists. And Canadians that want to defend this country from your dirty, sneaky, backstabbing actions against this country aren't hate-driven white supremacists either. And Canadians that despise you for spitting on the uniforms of those that served and do serve this country to preserve its cornerstone of freedom aren't driven by hate or white supremacists driven by hate. Seeing you playing Captain Canada and the Commissioner of Scorn, spewing forth accusations as to who you think are the hateful ones is quite obnoxious, to say the least. Because you're the hateful one. You, yes you, because your actions can only be characterized as that of a monster. You're a traitor, understand? A piece of shit, to use an old Canadian expression.
Canadians are quick to point out that ISIS is wrong, that Islam is not incompatible with a Western secular democracy, a free place like Canada.
The only thing this Canadian is quick to point out is that I would never point out what he thinks I'm quick to point out, because it's a disgusting lie that shows nothing but contempt for the principles of this country and the people in it. You're an intellectual mongoloid and an embarrassment to this country. And the lie pretty much wipes the entire foundation of Western society out of existence. It's saying that the development of the West wasn't built on anything significant, really. It just sort of magically happened. This is trademark Justin Trudeau, because he's always trying to delegitimize the principles of the West, and then he annihilates it further with diversity. But the forefront calling of the federal government is to protect its citizens from physical harm, not make them vulnerable by declaring it open season on the moral values. Worse yet, granting one group exclusive protection and license to cultivate their toxic religion. But he likes to mention ISIS because he likes to pretend that ISIS is the only toxic side effect of Islam, when really it's Islam itself that's toxic. But I don't give a shit what ISIS thinks anyway. I never invited ISIS to the discussion table as to what's compatible with our values and basic fabric of our society. I don't need their fucking appraisal on the matter, you yo-yo. But hey, since you've raised the subject of ISIS, ISIS is just one of Hillary's accessories, of henchmen, largely funded by gangster states like Qatar and Saudi Arabia, no different than her other tentacles and splinter groups, the likes of the Muslim Brotherhood. Well, you wanted girl power, you got it. A mafia crime boss in heels, the Revlon Dawn. This woman is so corrupt, responsible for so much suffering, death, destruction, treason, yet the media machine manages to keep the majority of her endeavors behind the scenes, while they continue to harvest the sham that she's a divine humanitarian. It really is sad humanity has reached a point of moral decadence like never before, when one considers the scope of the day and age we're living in. And while the media pimp their lies and the real journalists get ostracized, exiled, and exterminated, late-night comedy filth like this rake in millions of dollars acting as decoys to cover up all the revolting lies, ridiculing anyone that is trying to deliver the truth to the world. It's so disheartening. And despite the efforts of WikiLeaks and various real journalists, researchers, and investigators, the snakes quickly mobilized to draw out the smokescreens and sling some dirty bombs. And all the droids, united with the Clinton News Network legionnaires, will act like complete imbeciles and say any absurdity at their own expense to defend her image. It's a circus sideshow.
Also interesting is, remember, it's illegal to possess these stolen documents. It's different for the media. So everything you learn about this, you're learning from us. And in full disclosure, let's take a look at what is in there and what it means.
And the cackling psychopath is exulted that so many fools willingly defile and martyr themselves to polish her heels. And her influence spills over into our media here in Canada in the usual sickening way.
Hillary Clinton's Quebec ancestry dates back to me from... Yes, like Madonna, Angelina Jolie, President candidate has connections to 17th century Philip. Wow.
Oh boy, celebrities, the seeing eye dogs for the zombie generation.
He's a dog.
I'd like to punch him in the face.
And even though Hillary lost and had to wave goodbye to that particular victory train,
she's still not in jail where she belongs.
You know?
but the point being here is that you're on board with Hillary in the inferno of lies. And since you're allied with Hillary and Hillary is allied with ISIS, that makes you allied with ISIS. Wow, all riding a merry-go-round of hell. But that's not what the CBC is saying, though, is it? And that's why we're continuing to see periodic bulletins about the orientation of facts to desperately try and maneuver people away from the filthy tangle of lies. And you've made your insolence quite clear, a big mistake there, by the way. And we know well that you're in the Hillary circle, on board with John Podesta and the gang that champion diversity, just like you do. Okie dokie then, let's have a little boo at an email that one of Podesta's chums wrote that lends itself to this whole multicultural diversity enterprise. The title of the email itself comes as no real shock. Multikultistan, a house of horrors for ordinary Germans. I'm only going to point out a couple of things here because it's just too long to go through, which speaks volumes in itself, but I do urge people to visit this page on the WikiLeaks site and read through it because the hideous nature and the statistics and level of carnage and devastation is alarming beyond all measure. I'll read the intro here and then I'm going to shuttle down to a specific paragraph. Britain is something of the odd man out in immigration-devastated Europe, having also received large numbers of successful non-Western immigrants such as Hindus, Sikhs and Chinese. By sharp contrast, the UK's Muslims, blacks, Roma, and other problem immigrant groups do no better than those on the continent, as I will show with statistics at a later date. Muslim immigration and multicultural madness have left a trail of misery and mayhem across Germany, with far worse to come because of demographics. Muslims make up only 9% of Berlin's population, yet account for 70% of young repeat criminals, revealed Berlin public prosecutor Roman Rüsch. Note the mockery with phrases coined as multicultural madness. It's all just a knee-slapping jamboree to these snakes. Now I'll draw your attention down to the 19th paragraph, I believe it is. Multiculturalism, the human variant of mad cow disease, seems to have run its course in much of Europe, but is still going strong in Germany. Tune into German television or visit German news websites, and it's like going back in time to much darker days. Most, but definitely not all, German media coverage of Turkish and other Muslim immigrants is just one big blur of multiculti twaddle. In fact, the reporting is so delightfully deceitful that it becomes entertaining in a demented, freaky sort of way. In strident denial of staring them in the face immigration calamities, the vast majority of German journalists continue to preach the multicultural gospel with all the religious fervor of snake oil televangelists, threatening the growing number of apostates with fire and brimstone. And you people are worried about Trump talking about grabbing some pussy.
House of Horrors. The human variant of mad cow disease. Delightfully deceitful.
Well, the same freak show of deceitful news reporting is occurring here, but I don't find it delightful, nor is it a delightful proposal to embrace the human variant of mad cow disease, because that's what it is, and that's what you're doing, and you're encouraging it all on. These mobs of orcs are euphoric that you're their little boy toy that's eager to stand at podiums and welcome them with open arms to engulf and molest Canada.
Justin Trudeau! Justin Trudeau! Canada!
Look at yourself there, you slimy snake. They're hailing you like a fucking prophet because you've opened the gates for them to flood our country with their fucking poison.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me here today. It's great
And
to
that's
be
why
back
it's
again
intensely
this
gross
year.
to see you
Justice
globe-trotting
Allen
around,
Convention.
visiting sites where men died to preserve the values that you are pissing all over. And then when the religion of peace strikes, you think your fancy socks and signature is going to heal the world. I have never seen anything so disgusting in all my life. And I'm not a spring chicken. And yet all the Trudeau groupies label Trump as the disgusting one. Ah, yes, the orange buffoon simpleton that only craves attention. Gee, Trump is doing multiple photo ops, signing some executive orders that will get some shit done, and this little worm is traveling around on a perpetual global photo op, doling out money and posing for pictures at historic sites and signing consolatory books. And then, of course, a photo shoot comprised of someone taking a picture of his personal photographer taking a picture of him autographing photos. Yep, can't forget that pressing time slot on the busy itinerary of the PM's office. He's probably sending autographed sympathy cards to the jihadis that work at the Trudeau airport, sharing his condolences about having their security clearance reduced. That's right, you're not mistaken. If you're a jihadi recruit with vested aspirations to blow up airports and aircraft, you're still eligible for a career position at our airports, and the only snag is that you might get your security clearance bumped a little. On the other hand, isn't it interesting how if it was discovered that you might be a Trump supporter, there was a good chance that you could lose your job at, well, pretty well anywhere. And speaking of employment, gender identity on employment applications will soon be outlawed because Trudeau will demand it to be replaced with one box with the question, "Are you a feminist?"
We still have a problem because there are men out there who will not say, yes, I am a feminist.
I don't think so, you imbecile. You're the problem, and a really big one. Odd how you're the one talking about sneaky ways and slipping things through and pitting a neighbor against a neighbor.
It's easy to try and scare people into voting for you. It's easy to try and say something that's going to pit a neighbor against a neighbor. And if you do it in a sneaky way and use coded language, maybe you won't get called on it by the majority. Maybe you'll get to slip it through.
Coded languages. Well, I'm tired of your cloak and dagger multiculti twaddle that disguises the human mad cow disease and the consequential house of horrors with the new neighbors.
So, do we have a problem with Islamophobia in this country? Yes, we do.
Nope. Because Islam is the problem, which also makes you the problem. And that's where the great divide is, you see. Trump is not trying to tell the citizens of the United States that Islam is compatible with the West, because he knows it's an ignorant, irresponsible, and disgraceful thing to try and convince people of. It's bizarre that Trump is accused of being reckless and irresponsible. They seem to overlook the fact that he knows enough to be taking this seriously for what it is. Trudeau sends out tweets to the world inviting every cockroach and religious zealot into our country because, well, we're such wonderfully fuzzy folks up here in the north, and diversity is our strength. And then when he realizes his stupidity just broke a glass ceiling, these are the characteristic remarks he makes in an attempt to recover.
Canadians know that the only path for this country is to be respectful, accepting, to be there for each other. It's in our national DNA. It comes from the long winters and the cold nights that Canadians, whether you've been here a few weeks or many generations or a few millennia, know that we need to be there for our neighbors.
It's in our DNA. Good grief, spare me. I can't be certain, but I think his brain is a snow cone. He's just numb, completely numb, and he beats this diversity theme until it's numb too. He's either spitting it out like a car salesman, as he did here.
So I guess my question would be, how do you reconcile your brand as a self-styled feminist prime minister with attendance at a gender-segregated event?
Well, the fact is, the values that define Canada include respect and openness towards our full diversity. Indeed, understanding that diversity is a source of strength, not a source of weakness.
Or else he's babbling away in desperation, trying to convince everyone they're witnessing the event horizon of our full diversity.
We are a place that has figured out that diversity can be a source of strength, not just a source of weakness.
Not just a source of weakness.
And as I look at this beautiful room with the sisters upstairs, everyone here, the diversity we have just within this mosque.
It didn't come out like a cookie cutter that time.
Not just a source of
and
weakness.
That's because it's dog food. And he's the true meaning of sleeper cell. And it's dog food because when you're standing in a room full of goons that warehouse their women up in a balcony like carry-on luggage because they're forbidden to sit with the men, you tend to be on swampy ground when trying to sound convincing that things are as wonderfully diverse as what you claim them to be. Gee, when you visit Saudi Arabia, are you going to host the same speech about the rainbow of diversity to a gathering of scumbags that treat their AK-47 better than their 4 wives? Also note that from the media's perspective, the only protest to the overall affair is really just the fact that Trudeau attended. So in other words, discriminatory rituals are a green light as long as self-styled feminist Trudeau doesn't do fashion photo shoots at them. Incidentally, it's also nauseating to hear his big proclamations like Canada is a place that has figured out that diversity is blah blah blah. Fuck off. Anything Canada has figured out isn't anything that you think it's figured out. Although by now, much of Canada has figured out that you're a walking liability and a curse on this country that needs to be booted out of that office. You and your tortured version of diversity. Goodness me, you are even trying to convince the world that diversity isn't just sound social policy, but the engine of invention. Remember that?
Diversity isn't just sound social policy. Diversity is the engine of invention.
Fuck you, asshole.
Let's get something straight here, Wonder Boy. Diversity, the way you whack off about it, is not the engine of invention. Diversity can certainly contribute to an inventive process, no question there, but it is not the engine. Creative thinking is rational, objective, creative thinking. And knowledge, with the latter providing a strong advantage, but someone can be a creative thinker without much knowledge and then pursue and discover knowledge through the process of their creative thinking and experimentation. That's the essence of it. That's how it works. I know that from a logical standpoint, but also because I'm a creative thinker myself. Only a charlatan that isn't a creative thinker would say something so absurd and then try to smuggle that falsehood through for further manipulation to serve his own dubious ends. And this is one of the things that makes me so furious about parasites like you. You seem to think you know the resume of what drives people, like hate, for example. While I'm driven by my work, creative thinking that produces productive, efficient, quality work. I've always been driven by my work. It's called work ethic, something you know absolutely nothing about. In fact, all we really need to do is observe a remark you made when you were asked about the polls concerning the so-called Syrian refugee program.
But back to that question, again, 60% of people polled said they don't support the plan. So why do you think they're fearful of helping those refugees?
Well, first of all, we've seen polls do all sorts of things, and I don't put a lot of stock in polls. If I'd paid too much attention to polls, I probably would have spent September golfing or canoeing instead of campaigning.
If I'd paid too much attention to polls, I probably would have spent September golfing or canoeing and golfing or canoeing.
Yep, that about says it all. Notwithstanding the refugee problem, that's pretty sad to hear.
Well, if the polls are no good, I'm going home to go canoeing.
He doesn't even realize his own confession that he's just a useless playboy that's never had to make a concerning decision in his life and never done a constructive thing in his life. Fucking useless. I don't have a large enough time window to focus on this whole productive work ethic subject matter here, but I'll be coming back to it as a central point in upcoming videos. Big time. For now, I'll do a wee sidebar here.
A wee sidebar?
So look at it this way, genius. Although the chances of one being stranded on a remote island are pretty remote, it doesn't alter the fact that one would quickly discover that the only diversity available will be that which your thinking mind creates. And since your survival would be hinged upon it, I think waiting around to see if someone else turns up that might perhaps add some diversity isn't a favorable idea. But the deserted island scenario also illustrates the fact that altruism, which is the core premise of socialism, is metaphysically impossible to bracket as man's fundamental cardinal value. And lastly, but certainly not least, the deserted island scenario also illustrates that since no amount of praying will build you a shelter or show you how to start a fire or any of those other pressing and essential tasks, it disqualifies religion as well as a value. Period. And that pretty much brings me back to you. And so here you are, and you're going to say to me, duh. Oh, sorry, for those that are unaware of who this is the witch doctor of a now infamous motion, otherwise known as M103. M103 proposes that Canadians need to heal to the preposterous and never-ending demands and barbaric whims of the ideological and theological cult of Islam. And don't try to dress it up as otherwise. Don't get cute. Islamophobia. Fuck you. There are a few things to be said about this bitch. Firstly, she immigrated once from Pakistan to England and then from England to Canada. She's had 2 chances at a new life away from the country she originally fled, and the first thing she does when she manages to get elected to office here in Canada is start squawking about what she thinks Canadians should be allowed to think and say about the decrepit cultural roots and barbaric rituals of the country she originally fled from. Oh, this begs the argument that you didn't flee, does it? Well, then you should have fucking well stayed there. Secondly, did you really think that you wouldn't receive mail from angry people of all varieties? You really do think people are stupid. But no, you know what you're up to. And it's vile. You really are vile. Someone that does something so vile deserves to be called names. And then you stand up in the House of Commons and, with embellishment, read the most abusive threats and comments that you could dig up that were dispatched to you, trying to convey this idea that anyone objecting is, well, you know, that raging white supremacist psychopath I made sure to point out previously. But I noticed you didn't read any of the letters similar to mine that were objectively written, telling you briefly and plainly and simply that you have no right to be doing what you're doing because freedom of speech is a cornerstone of a free society. And there would have been plenty of such letters mailed to you. Plenty. But you don't want to read any of those ones because they offer no theatrical advantage to you, because it doesn't convey the chilling mood that only a raging psychopath would disagree with your fucking notion. Because that's the image you people so desperately need to promote. So I have an image for you to visualize. You can take your motion and with an upward motion, shove it up your ass. And since the media machine is aligned with her schemes and filthy lies, she can count on them to crank up the fear factor by enthusiastically throwing around phrases like the massacre.
All right, let me go move on to this Islamophobia motion. In the wake of the massacre...
Yes, you know it. The slithering news douche is referring to the false flag shooting at the Quebec Mosque that you snakes take great pleasure in reminding people of to promote your agenda. Yes, a false flag event orchestrated and sanctioned through government channels to push the narrative that they so badly need to solicit right now. Don't kid yourself. Do you think a snake that is willing to force-feed Canada with human mad cow disease is going to be the least bit concerned about a few people deliberately getting shot to provide the dark mood he thinks vindicates his agenda? Again, don't kid yourself. That was no random event, all planned, I'm afraid. It's also another subject matter for further detail in future videos. But for the time being, I need to get back to this duh thing. A liberal motion is not going to force a Sharia blasphemy law on Canada. Duh. Stop being so dumb, you dumb dummies. Well, you couldn't have done a finer job making a case against your own motion. You're not very clever, are you? In any case, look at all the reinforcement that you've loaded on there to reassure folks that we're staying well away from that Sharia blasphemy stuff. Give that a wide berth. Stay clear of that third rail. Gee, we have a duh and a dumb directed at all the double dummies. Something along those lines, I suppose. It sounds serious, though. Maybe even tape that zone off. Danger. Something to be phobic about, I guess you could say. And so it doesn't seem to occur to you that you're making a case against your own motion. You're providing glaring grounds to criticize it. In fact, you are criticizing it, or being Islamophobic in your words. What's the matter? You're not afraid of being one of 4 wives, are you? But you see, with that in mind, it's not the Canadian way to have 4 wives, because it's not the Canadian way to conceptualize women as luggage. Duh! But hey, are you up for an honor killing, or perhaps a stoning or two? No, I didn't think so. And by the way, the E411 petition that you like to refer to as solid validation to support your actions has wording in it that's more vague than your silly M103. All forms of Islamophobia, it says. Oh really? And that would be whatever whims your medieval feelings and writings demand? Words are pliable to all you oracles, like the way you transform the term Muslim into a race of people to peddle your poison. Islam is an ideology woven into religion. It's not a race. You can't join a race. Notice you never hear them proclaim, Islam is the fastest growing race today. No, because that would sound epically stupid and reveal them for the idiots they are. So that's why they always say it's the fastest growing religion. And besides, if they use the word religion, it automatically means it's nice. But if you criticize the not so nice religion, you're a racist. Go figure. You are born into a race. You can't be born as an idea. Fuck, can't you people see that? It's so plain as day. And so then the next point here is, just who do you think you are to turn your nose up at questions directed to you about this? You're an elected official, albeit regretfully, and you don't get to decide whether you want to answer questions or not. You are to be held accountable to the people with questions asked pertaining to your actions.
Do you ever think that you could have allayed the Conservatives' concerns by putting a definition of Islamophobia between a couple of commas in that motion?
I'm really looking forward to the committee making that conclusion.
But you haven't answered my question. Do you ever think you could have allayed their concerns by just
I don't think so, no.
Why not?
Any more questions?
Why don't you answer my question?
I'm interested in that. Yeah, we want to know that. What was your question?
Notice she had to inquire about the question because she wasn't really paying attention the first time around. She knows there's controversy and questions, but she doesn't give a shit. And she doesn't give a shit because she knows she has the machinery of lies
What was your question?
behind her.
So why wouldn't you have felt that you could have allayed their concerns by just putting a definition in the text of the motion? Put it between a couple of commas?
No, it was a really collaborative effort amongst all Canadians.
No, it wasn't a collaborative effort of all Canadians, and you are an impertinent piece of trash. You couldn't be more obvious with your indifference and contempt towards what's expected from you, because all you care about is your commitment to moving onward with the big lie. You make me sick. And I noticed the Peel Regional Police wasted no time in publishing an ominous video to provide some muscle for your motion.
As Chief of the Peel Regional Police and a member of our community, I am very concerned about the hate-motivated incidents occurring in the region of Peel. On April 19th, during my Muslim Community Advisory Committee meeting, which includes leaders from the Muslim Council of Peel, we talked about our shared interest in ensuring the safety of those reporting hate crimes.
Another traitorous snake right here, a chameleon acting as a soldier for the Muslim Brotherhood. And if that's not bad enough, you sound like a little brat bragging about it.
Which includes leaders from the Muslim
If
Council.
you could only see how pitiful you look and how weak you make our country look. You're a disgrace to that uniform, and you're a fucking disgrace to this country. All of you so-called law enforcement, judicial, and government officials that are involved with all the lies and despicable cover-ups that are occurring. Slithering snakes, all of you. My blood boils when I hear you serpents talk about the future of children. You're a fucking disgrace. I can't believe what's happening to this country.
Tide kisses the shore.